Good morning, everyone. The film takes place on December 20 at John Kennedy International Airport, which is so packed with passengers on this particular day that the passenger count reaches over 190 passengers. An American girl named Hadley runs as fast as she can to catch her plane to London for the wedding of her father Andrew, who is marrying another woman because he separated from Hadley's mother long ago. Hadley struggles to get to the plane, and the clerk seems to tell her that the plane to London has just taken off. Hadley feels shocked and doesn't know how to behave, then asks the employee if she can travel on another plane. The employee answers Hadley by saying that the plane to London will be moving in an hour and a half, but the problem is that this plane has no empty seats in economy class. The clerk says there are 2 empty seats on the plane, but both belong to the expensive business class, and Hadley seems annoyed that she can't afford the ticket. Hadley decides to call her father and tell him what has happened to her, but her father allows her to buy a business class ticket and is willing to pay for the ticket after Hadley arrives in London. Hadley goes to the waiting room and waits for the plane to take off, but notices that her phone battery is on the blinker. She then tries to find a connector to recharge her phone. Hadley is unable to find the phone's charging connector, and suddenly a young man steps in and offers to use her phone's charging connector, and something strange happens between him and Hadley as they look at each other admiringly and are attracted at first sight. Hadley thanks the young man for helping him, then gets to know him and discovers that his name is Oliver and that he'll be traveling with her on the same plane to London because he's a British citizen and lives in the city of London. But he's come to America purely to study. Hadley and Oliver are clearly at ease with each other, talking about their personal lives without feeling anxious. Oliver invites Hadley to dinner before the flight to London. Hadley agrees to have dinner with Oliver, then tells him everything that happened to her after arriving at the airport, and says that she would have been in the air if she could have taken the first plane and wouldn't have met Oliver, but assures him that she's happy about the coincidence that brought them together. After finishing dinner, Hadley and Oliver quickly run to catch the plane before takeoff, and it appears that they boarded the plane at the last moment and then say goodbye, as each of them will be seated in a different seat. Hadley is seated in the business class seat, while Oliver is in the low-cost economy class seat. But surprised to discover that the seatbelt on his seat isn't working, Oliver calls the stewardess and tells her that the seatbelt isn't working, and the stewardess tells him that he can't travel on the plane without a seatbelt due to safety measures, but Oliver asks her to find him another seat. The stewardess tries to look for an empty sky and accidentally finds it next to Hadley and allows Oliver to sit in it, and Hadley and Oliver seem amazed at the beautiful coincidence, which is repeated for the second time. Hadley and Oliver feel happy to spend the flight together, especially as it's a long one, as it will last around 6 hours, and then they start chatting to each other. The plane starts to take off, and it becomes clear that Hadley is scared, then grabs Oliver's hand, who tries to calm her down, and asks her questions about the meals she likes and her favorite color to distract her and reduce her fear. Oliver's plan works when the plane reaches the right altitude. Then he starts talking to Hadley again, who tells him about her parents, where she says she lived a good life with her parents. Hadley says there was nothing between her mother and father until her father found a job in London and fell in love with a woman named Charlotte, and decided to separate from Hadley's mother and marry Charlotte. Oliver tells Hadley that he's also going to a wedding, but doesn't tell her the identity of the newlyweds, and then tells her about his family, where he says he has a younger brother and carried with him the tragedy of his mother's cancer during their childhood. Hadley cries for Oliver and asks him about his mother's health, then is shocked when Oliver tells him that his mother has recovered from cancer, but that it has spread through her body again. Hadley tries to console Oliver, and they spend most of the night together, and it seems that their relationship has begun to develop very quickly, and the admiration between them has begun to turn into true love. The next day, Hadley and Oliver wake up to the sound of the plane landing on the London airport tarmac, then try to get everything ready, and Hadley asks Oliver where the wedding is invited. Oliver responds by saying that the wedding will take place in an area called Beckenham, which is close to where his father's wedding took place, and after his arrival in London. Hadley and Oliver separate because each has a different passport. Oliver writes his phone number in Hadley's phone and asks her to send him a message, then says goodbye and suddenly appears. Someone accidentally collides with Hadley and her phone seems to fall to the ground before recording Oliver's phone number, which seems to have disappeared. Addie is very upset because there's no other way to call Oliver, so she gets into the cab and starts charging her phone in the hope that it will work, that the phone has kept Oliver's number, but to no avail. Addie arrives at her father's wedding venue and finds Charlotte's friends waiting for her and thinks they'll treat her badly, but discovers she's wrong because Charlotte's friends treat her with all love and help her prepare for the wedding. Hadley notices at the beginning of the wedding that her father and Charlotte are at the peak of their happiness, and it's clear that they love each other, and Hadley seems happy for her father, although the situation is difficult for her. Hadley's father welcomes his daughter, hugs her, and tells her that being with him is an added joy for him. Then Charlotte arrives and gets to know Hadley, who blesses her marriage to her, and it's clear that Charlotte is a kind woman who loves Hadley's father. Hadley is sitting with the guests and suddenly hears people talking about a farewell party for a woman with cancer because she's going to die soon. And the party takes place in the Beckenham area, where the wedding Oliver has spoken to Hadley about is taking place on the plane. Hadley senses that the guests are talking about Oliver's mother, who is also suffering from cancer, then decides to go to the farewell party to find out the truth for herself, but her father and Charlotte ask her to take photos with her. Hadley apologizes to her father and Charlotte and says she must leave quickly, then take the bus to the Beckenham area while we're back with you, viewers. Wait until you find out what's been going on with Oliver all this time. Olivier came out of the airport and waited outside for Hadley for a long time until he was surprised by his little brother's arrival, then decided to leave because he was sure Hadley would text him later, as he was sure he had saved his phone number in Hadley's phone. Oliver went with his little brother to his mother's farewell party, which was a masquerade, but it was a farewell party for Oliver's mother because the cancer came back to her. Oliver's mother discovered that her illness was late and hopeless and decided to stop receiving chemotherapy in order to live out the rest of her life with family and friends, and determined to gather all her family members, neighbors, and loved ones at her farewell party. Oliver has come from America to say goodbye to his mother, although the situation is difficult for him, especially as he is very attached to his mother, but there is nothing he can do to save her. The party begins, and each guest makes a special bid to say goodbye to Oliver's mother, who looks happy, but Oliver is sad and unable to bear what is happening in front of him, then decides to leave the party, but his mother catches up with him and finds him collapsed by the intensity of grief. Oliver asks his mother to continue receiving treatment to stay with them at least for a long time, but his mother tells him that the treatment has no benefit as she can only live for 6 months. Oliver's mother says it's best for everyone to accept his death and stay by his side in the last moments of his life. Then she embraces Oliver and tries to comfort and soothe him, while Hadley arrives at the party and is surprised by the atmosphere and doesn't know what to expect, not exactly what's going on. Hadley meets Oliver's brother, gets to know him and Oliver's mother, then finally realizes that Oliver's mother has organized a party to say goodbye to family members before her death, and Hadley tries to console her. Hadley is surprised to find that Oliver's mother is happy because she's with family members and people he loves and isn't interested in his death. And suddenly, Oliver arrives at the place and is so happy to see Hadley again, he hugs her tightly. The two leave the party to talk, and Hadley asks Oliver why he lied to her when he told her on the plane that he'd come to London for a wedding and not her mother's farewell party. But she notices that Oliver is distraught and unable to control himself because of what he's going through. Oliver answers Hadley's question badly and tells her that he can't talk about his mother's illness with a girl he's just met to meet her. But Hadley is adored by his words and appreciates his predicament at the same time, then leaves him alone until he calms down. On the way, Hadley discovers that the curse of running out of battery on her phone still haunts her because she relies too much on her phone to get back to her father's wedding party. then feels lost alive and doesn't know the way back to her father and walks alone and doesn't know how to behave. Hadley asks someone on the street for help and takes her phone to call her father, tells him she's lost in the city and says the name of the street she's on, but her father asks her to stay where she is because he's coming to her. Hadley's father arrives on the street where Hadley is and notices that she is very sad, then tries to talk to her to find out why she is sad. Hadley tells her father the story of how she met Oliver from beginning to end. Hadley concludes by saying that she feels she has fallen in love with a young man she met in a short space of time, and that it makes no sense to her. But her father responds by saying that love contradicts logic, and as the philosophers say, what we leave with logic cannot be taken back with passion. Hadley is touched by her father's words and thanks him for helping her, and tells him she's happy he's found the love of his life and happiness with Charlotte, then goes home with him to finish the celebrations with some of them. We return to Oliver, who was sitting with his family members, and tells them the story of how he met Hadley and assures them that he has fallen in love with her, but feels that the chances of his relationship with Hadley succeeding are weak. Oliver's family members try to encourage Oliver to abandon the troubling possibilities and advise him to meet Hadley and confess his love before it's too late. But Oliver is reluctant to act on the advice. Oliver finally decides to risk confessing his love to Hadley, who was celebrating with her father and dancing with him, and suddenly Oliver arrives on the scene and apologizes to Hadley and tells her that he fell in love at first sight and wishes to end his life with her. Hadley also confesses her love for Oliver, and the relationship that began by chance at the airport between will last forever, as Hadley has decided to marry Oliver